When I said 10 minutes, I meant U.S. 10 minutes, not the Italian 10 minutes. So, following our first with Michelle and Mike Froman, we will move now on, I think, a very important topic that is of interest of everybody, which is the banking economy, the governments. Of course, we made a mistake. It's not the war now, it's the wars. It's plural for what is happening in Israel. And in order to address these problems, I think we have a very interesting panel. I'd like to join me Francesco Cardinali. Francesco, would you please take the stage? Francesco is the senior country officer of JP Morgan and a longtime friend, please. And then we have Stefano Caselli. Stefano is the dean of Bocconi Business School, so School of Management. And as you probably know, especially for our MBA classes, the MBA in Bocconi is now the 6th best in the world, according to the Financial Times. And then we have, in remote, we have Giuseppe Castagna. He is the CEO of Banco BPM. Good morning, Giuseppe, or good afternoon to you. Giuseppe's role is very important because Banco BPM serves one of the wealthiest regions in the world, which is Lombardy. And so it is a really good indicator of how the economy, not only for Italy, but for Europe is going. It's very much linked, of course, what's happening in Germany. So thank you for being with us, Giuseppe. And then Sara Eisen, I don't think she needs any presentation. Sara is from CNBC. She is a co-anchor of Squawk in the Street, and she is very committed to make, I think, a good panel this morning with 3 Italians talking about economy and finance. And so I'll leave you the floor. And again, thank you all for being here.
Thank you. And thank you for such a generous topic. Banking, government, economy in a half an hour. We should get through all of it. Right? So no, as mentioned, obviously we're here at the Council on Foreign Relations, and when we talk about the future of Europe, we're going to talk about investing opportunities and the economy and the geopolitical role of Europe, and I think that's really front and center here today. And the world has changed again after this weekend's horrific terrorist attacks in Israel. And I'm just wondering how, Francesco, you're an investor, you're the head of the Italy Bank of JP Morgan, how you think about what the impact is going to be on Europe.
Well, the impact that we see is a continuous uncertainty in all the decisions that are done across businesses, whether it's banking, whether are our clients, whether are corporates or private individual. And this is what we have been experiencing in the last 6 to 12 months, that it is very, very difficult today to really forecast what could be the next 12, 18 months scenarios in terms of macro, geopolitical, fiscal, monetary policies, and we really need to be alert that, given the geopolitical uncertainty will have a very strong impact in the cautiousness specifically with which many of our businesses, and again, many of our also private clients will decide where to spend, where to invest money, because unfortunately there is not a clarity, and when there is no clarity, it brings, especially when you need to put a lot of money to work, a lot of conservative approach. And that's what we see, of course, in terms of the macroeconomic dynamics. Europe, Italy have been decelerating in the last, let's say, 3 to 6 months.
Recession? Are they in recession?
They're not in recession. I mean, we do forecast, but the general forecast is a range of GDP growth in 2023 between 0.5 and 1%, as well as 2024. So for now, it doesn't seem that a recession is coming, but it's more an environment of very strong cautiousness and conservative approach to investment, to strategic acquisition, to personal investment as well, to spending. And what we suggest and what we see is that most of our clients are really spending a lot of time to look at, is my company going to cope well if the scenario A, B, C, D, E, the worst case scenarios are happening or not? Am I prepared for it or not? And that brings a lot of cautiousness again in the decision-making process.
I mean, cautiousness is not good for growth. Stefano, how do you prepare the future business leaders? And I'm told that all of them go to your university for what the world looks like right now.
How many minutes? Yeah, we need hours to discuss
one,
about. Okay, that's great. But
half.
in a nutshell, so let me say, Europe. I want to say something completely different. So Europe is the place and is a crossroad for what you said before, because Europe stay in the middle between U.S. and the Gulf and Asia, and Europe, let me say, is the place, to understand how we can interact with the other part in the world. So it's very strategic. And if you want to become a leader, or you have the ambition to become a leader, let me say Europe today is a great platform, because we stay in the comfort zone, a very safe environment in terms of democracy, rules, and so on. But in the same time, we are at a crossroad. It's really the place. And let me say, stay in the shoes of a person driving a business school is fundamental in this moment to be, let me say, very open and to help the student not only to stay in their silos, because this is the temptation of every business school, to push students to stay in their silos, the silos of finance, the silos of marketing, and so on. That's great. It's the comfort zone. It is much more important to break the silos and to have, let me say, a very open view, where geopolitics is one of the issues, not only for business school, but for every company. And we can remember, the article of Financial Times 2 weeks ago, where, basically they challenged business school to say you have to train, people and CEO to have their chief political office within large corporations. And it is true, because if you want to understand what is the impact of the new world, what are the trends today, it's fundamental to integrate very different content from data science to geopolitics inside, let me say, business as usual.
So you think that's
it's
a good
fundamental.
Idea, chief political officer in companies?
It's fundamental. It's fundamental to have. And let me say the challenge of business school is to enlarge a bit their border, because we lived in a world where we have a business school, in the middle. On the other end, we have engineering school, and on the other side, school of governance. Let me say today the borders are not clear, because if you want to train people to become leaders of whatever kind of organization, you need to mix. It is a great challenge, also for business school, but it is our duty and is exactly what we want to do.
Giuseppe, how are you thinking about the world differently after the events of this weekend? And does it impact your decision-making as you run a big bank? Uh-oh. Was that too tough?
Yeah.
We'll bring him back. We'll bring him back on the question. Technical difficulties. I'm curious, Francesco, you mentioned the caution word. And I do wonder how Europe compares to the rest of the world right now when it comes to a destination for capital and investment. Is it appealing?
I think, again, Europe is still very appealing for international capital. Of course, specifically, I focus on my region, on Italy, but I see it across Europe. We have seen in the last 2-3 years, now let me just focus 1 second about the Italian situation, a lot of infrastructure money, capital coming in to try to invest in some of the long-needed structural investment that needs to be done. Each country in Europe has its own strengths and weaknesses. Again, for example, in Italy, we need to focus very deeply in digital innovation, the backbone of the fiber structure. We need to focus on green transition, and this is a topic across all of Europe. There is a big theme of sustainable mobility as well. And there are various drivers. The war and the pandemic have really pushed some of the long-needed investment quite heavily. You look at us, we're very much dependent on energy from abroad. We basically imported up to before the time of the war 40% of our gas need from Russia. That had to be brought to zero. Now we are probably 9 to 10%, while focusing a lot on renewable. And what we see is a lot of international money, a lot of international capital that are really trying to invest in these trends. So whether it's the company that are at the center of investing in, again, building a fiber infrastructure, renewable platform. And just to give you some names, we have names like KKR, Blackstone, Macquarie have really poured quite several billions of dollars, again, in the Italian country to specifically follow these themes. And it is a clear example of...
a small picture, not the audio.
Giuseppe, are you with
Okay.
us? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Now
Welcome back. I'll give you a chance to answer the question, which was the first question I posed about whether you're thinking about the world differently after the events of the weekend, and whether it impacts your decision making at all atop one of the bigger banks in Italy.
Of course, is another issue of worries, another reason of worries for the environment and the global economy. Of course, for Europe and for Italy in particular, being one of the closest country to the Middle East, and one of the European closest region country to the Middle East, is a problem that concern us, not in terms, of course, of economics, because the relationship are quite limited in terms of exchange between Italy and Israel, but of course there is a lot in terms of oil and gas issue and impact, and of course the global situation is really close to be on fire. So the real worry is for the social and for what can happen in terms of injuries and people who are suffering. Then we will see what can happen in terms of economics. Not yet ready to understand how this will go on, but for sure is another reason for being worried in an environment which was already worried for the reason Francesco was mentioning before, the slowdown of the economy, even though I have to say after 3 years of growth. So we have a good starting point with some problem to face.
Yeah, no question about it. We were just having a conversation about whether Europe is an attractive place for investment, and Francesco was saying that, I think you named names, which was even great, KKR and Blackstone and others, investing in Italy specifically right now. And I'm curious, Giuseppe, about the banking system and whether Europe's banks are investable right now. You never quite know after Credit Suisse and the financial crisis. What is the health right now, and what are their investment prospects? Giuseppe, that's for you.
Yes. No, the banking system, of course, is experiencing a relatively good situation after many years of turmoil. I have to say that now the Italian banking system recovering in many aspects in terms of NPE ratio. First of all, we come from years of very high NPE weight on the balance sheet of the bank, capability to be remunerative, to make profit, and of course liquidity also. So now the situation, having reduced a lot the number of banks in Italy, not only the big banks that are now less than before, many of them were aggregated, we had integration amongst banks, but also the small bank were in a way absorbed by other banks. We passed from more than 400 banks 8-10 years ago to less than 100 banks right now. So the level of reaction of the banking system is much better. This is another good reason not to be too pessimistic, because the capability to absorb some negative impact from default rate of our client will be much better than 10 years before. Let's say that the capability to disposal NPE and to deal with NPE has been one of the main tasks the bank faced during the last years. And I have to say that now all the system is very good in detecting, monitoring, and trying to help in anticipation potential problem from our clients. So the state of health of the banking system, I would say, is very good.
That's a good health.
Bear in mind that for the listed, the publicly listed banks, I would say a good 50-60% of the free float of each of them is owned by Anglo-Saxon investors, whether it's US, UK. So the banking system is very investable. I think what Europe is still trying to achieve, and Giuseppe can comment on this, is that each country still have slightly different rules, regulations, and that is preventing, a potential consolidation across countries.
You want to see more of a union approach to regulation?
Well, the banking union is still not there yet. So the willingness, because it takes time to develop, but again, the willingness of the banking system to consolidate across Europe is not there yet. So we still have a strong domestic championship, and some of them has presence in some of the other European countries, but the real cross-country consolidation has not happened yet.
Stefano, do you have a perspective? How far are we away from a European banking union?
No, let me say we did a lot, but there is a long way ahead. I have two stories to mention. The first one is the level of robustness of the banking system. If I consider the average level of regulatory capital, which is the key measure to understand if a banking system is solid or not, is basically the double of the minimum requirement fixed by Basel Committee. So if I see the European banking system from the moon, I have to say the parachute is there. And it's quite important because every time a recession could start. And today, obviously, we have a question mark. Both in US and Europe, the recession will start or not. Okay, we can debate for hours. And the problem is the banking system, the financial system is solid enough to avoid a combination, which is the perfect storm between recession and the crisis, like it happened in 2008. And today in Europe, let me say, the banking system is solid. The other story is the banking system in Europe has, let me say, the scale which is appropriate to boost the growth into the European system. And the answer is till now not, because if I consider market shares of the first three largest banks in US, they have 35% of the market. If I see the story in the European Union, the first three largest banks have 18%. So it's fundamental to move forwards M&A consolidation. But in this case, the problem is fiscal policy, because we have different fiscal policies in different countries, and became very difficult to move into, let me say, a cross-border M&A. It's going to happen because we need it, but we need, let me say, to improve this process.
Do you need scale too? I mean, JP Morgan, his bank, has, I think, a $400 billion market cap. What's the biggest bank in Europe? BNP Paribas?
It's BNP Paribas.
60 billion?
BNP Paribas,
There's
and
no
then
giant
Crédit
banks?
Agricole, and then Deutsche Bank. Exactly.
Do those banks need to become bigger and more global to compete effectively?
Yeah, but they need to merge. Because obviously, if you want to do that by yourself, it's a long way. To become bigger, you need consolidation. But today it's very difficult to do that inside the countries because of the M&A that had to happen. So it's fundamental to move to cross-border, which is a political decision on the one hand, but it's a very complex mix, let me say, of combination of fiscal policy.
Giuseppe, can you go buy a French bank, or can you get acquired by a German bank? How does that work? Do you want to be?
Frankly, almost the opposite, because I have my major shareholder is a French bank owning 10% of the bank.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
So it could happen.
But let me add something on that. I feel it's true that still we don't have a banking union, but I think it would be difficult to have a complete banking union without a more strict political union. Of course, if you, Italian government, for instance, they have a golden share on potential acquisition of Italian bank from other European country, not from extra-European. So this means that in many ways we still have a sort of protection, an internal protection of the banking system. And I think it's also in some ways also a good thing, because banks are infrastructure for growing, for helping enterprise to grow, the economy of a country to go ahead. So would be very dangerous without a more complete political union in Europe to give to other countries the possibility to lead the economical growth in one country. So I don't think it's only a banking problem. On the other side, it's true that we are recently, almost recently, run by a European supervisor. It's 8 years that there is the ECB running the supervision on the European Bank. And maybe we need a bit more time to understand well how they apply the different rules in the different countries. So still a long way ahead, I think.
That's a polite way of complaining about your regulator, I think. Stefano, I mentioned the scale of European banks and how they're a lot smaller than American banks. We also look at some of just Fortune 500 companies and how much fewer there are in Europe relative to the size of the population and the economy, and why that is, and what you can do about it.
Let me say two numbers, 90 and 2 million. 90 is the number of European companies staying in the Fortune 500. I remember US 122. So let me say there is a gap, but the gap is not enormous. So sometimes
when we think
133 is the first one. But in terms of, the sum of, turnover is smaller compared to US companies. And obviously, you have to talk about profitability and risk. It's just simply the number. Obviously, you have to weigh numbers. So 90 companies, so there is a gap. But on the other way around, you have 2.5 million of SMEs. That's quite important because I see a potential of consolidation, and I see also a lot of hidden upside, and which is, let me say, the gamble for Europe in the next years, the capacity of Europe to attract investors, not only on large companies. Investors are perfectly aware, if I see the composition of shareholders of the 90 top companies in Europe, we have investors from US, from Asia, from every part of the world. This is not a problem. They perfectly know how to play the game. The problem is to attract investors and to have, the possibility to invest into the 2 million SMEs we have in Europe, because it's really, to unlock the potential to generate more GDP and employment, but stay on the other side of the table. It means to look for new upside, because we have to remember we live in a global world, beside world and everything, and global world means that pension funds and insurance company needs to generate upside if you want to receive a pension, if you want to be paid. If I'm going to crash with my car in some place, I would like to be paid. And also I hope he's doing that also for my kids. And for this reason, at global level, we need upside for investment. But to have it is fundamental to identify, new opportunities, and new opportunities land into SMEs that are private, and there is a lot of potential, there is a lot of upside.
Well, this is where the Next Gen EU Recovery Fund comes in, because I know you've got to be excited about that, Francesco, right, as a possibility to bring in foreign capital.
Yeah. So the two topics. One is the SMEs. The SMEs that Stefano was talking about, and of course in Italy, a big part of the structure of the economy is SMEs, as well as in Germany, in France, Spain.
Small and medium size.
Small, medium size, but even up to 500, 300 million euro sales. So they're really, but this company first are global. Too many times they are the market leader globally in what they do, and they really operate across many countries. as Stefano was saying, they are privately owned, so most of them are still owned by families. And I would say that after the pandemic, we have seen more and more these families that have decided to open up the capital, which is exactly the importance of bringing in professional capital to, again, put further growth into this company. But that's the tricky part, is that the mentality of many families is still to remain the 100% shareholder of the company, whereas the openness, again, to receive professional capital, which is not just money, is really to receive people who can help you in taking decisions and grow even further globally, is where the switch has to happen, and is happening, because I would say that after COVID, many of the family-owned companies have probably felt a bit worried about what happened, and they thought that 100% of their wealth was concentrated in one single asset. Hence, they started, let's diversify, let's put some money aside for our next generation. So it's happening. With the topic you raised,
wait, sorry, before we go on to that. So what industries, and you think American and global investors should be attracted to small and medium-sized businesses in Italy and Europe? In what types of businesses?
In Italy, we have all the sectors: industrial, manufacturing, luxury, design. I mean, I'll give you an example. We did an IPO in January, February. This is a very small...
one of the few.
One of the few. It's called Eurogroup. This company makes two most important pieces for the electric motors of the electric cars. So the client of this company are all the major manufacturers of electric cars, including Tesla. The two pieces are the stator and the rotor. It's a global leader. I mean, the company is worth roughly €1 billion in the stock market. The IPO was 400-500 million. We had investors from everywhere in the world. And this is a company, again, born by a family just outside Milan, grown internationally. And like this, there are many others examples in our universe, and not just in Italy, across. And the sectors are different in every country, but very, very... important also for some of the things. This company is the perfect company for the energy transition, the electrification of the car.
Okay, now can we talk about the Next Gen Recovery Fund? Because, I mean, Stefano, I know you call it a game changer, right?
It is. It is for two reasons. The first one, the idea of European Commission to create this recovery plan is to, let me say, to ring fencing the European system, like, let me say, a big umbrella against the next turmoil. So that's fundamental, because what we saw in the last 3 years is that despite of the very high public debt, as is happening in every country of the world, including the US, we don't have, let me say, volatility on the market because of this big umbrella. The other part of the story is that there is a lot of money. If I compare the recovery plan to the Marshall Plan after the Second World War, it is 4 times more, in terms of relative price. So just to explain the magnitude of, and the meaning. And this is not just simply to transfer money, that, however, has an impact on the GDP of the different countries, but it's fundamental to give a guidance to investors, because it's very clear, not European investors, global investors, because it's very clear the recovery plan identified 2 different avenues that are related to green transition and to digital transition. And that's fundamental, because when you start, creating an infrastructure and you identify the business plan and you receive money from every part of the world, it's a snowball effect. It's very difficult to say, I would like to stop the game, because we have money from all the investors in the world. It's a fundamental snowball effect that is going to affect Europe, hopefully, in terms of GDP and employment, but let me say also in terms of impact, because talking about green transition and digital transition, it became, let me say, a flagship story, not only for Europe, but for the entire world. So it's interesting for these reasons.
Giuseppe, is that an example of governments getting it right?
Yes, let me add something about what Professor Caselli was saying about the importance of recovery fund, it's important to notice that the European Union has tied the possibility to get the money to the need to make reforms. And reforms are one of the reasons why international investors are not that happy to invest in Italy. I'm talking about justice reform, fiscal reform, public administration reforms. And it's very important to give this possibility to get money only at the condition that we adjust our public administration in a way that is more friendly to investors. And of course, with the control on the expenditure and so on. So this is one of the important steps of the recovery funds, apart of course from the magnitude of the amount. Already they say that with the public debt that in Italy we have, would be impossible to pursue quickly digital, environmental infrastructure if we didn't have this, if we don't catch this opportunity. The other very important aspect is that is a sort of rebalance versus the less favorable area. 40% of the recovery fund should be addressed to the south of Italy, which is, we know that is the poor part of Italy, as well as there are a lot of opportunity for young people and women. So it's a sort of rebalance that EU is asking Italy to do in order to get money. Of course, it's very important also for international investors, apart from the reform, also for the opportunity that a complete rebuilding, I don't know, the infrastructure, both the physical one, like the railways, which were the first one to start with the recovery funds, but also motorway, and also digital infrastructure. We now have many international funds competing to build the new digital infrastructure in Italy together with the Italian company.
Well, it's a really big deal. I mean, do you think investors, Francesco, appreciate it? Is it underappreciated? I haven't talked about it on CNBC all year. Should we be talking about this more?
I think so. I mean, just to give you an order of magnitude for Italy, we're talking about roughly 200 billion euro, which is 10% roughly of our GDP. It's a lot of funds.
Stimulus.
It will get stimulus. There are 6 areas: digital and innovation, green transition, sustainable mobility, education, health, and social cohesion. Part also what Giuseppe was saying. 65% are the 3 main pillars. The rest is for the last 3. And is what I was telling you before. Some of the investors I mentioned, Blackstone, KKR, Macquarie, they've invested in the digital infrastructure. So right now there is a program to put the backbone of the broadband fiber system across the whole country. So not just in the main city, but across the whole country to make it fully digital. There is a plan to make one cloud system for the public administration that now sits on probably 10,000 different systems. So it's a lot of projects which are big, but then also they get into the micro of each town and of each city. But if done and implemented properly, would really be the game changer for our country. And this is something that you will see in the next in the medium term, because it will really give competitiveness, innovation, growth, and that's what we need, you know. And the way the money are granted, by the way, is the projects are funded once they reach certain stage. So if the project has reached stage 1, then you get the money disbursed. So it's done in a control check way, not just in helicopter money that then gets spread around. It's
over the
very
next
disciplined.
Few years?
Yeah.
We're going to see it? Okay, so as we wrap it up, you know, one of the purposes here and what we're trying to do is create dialogue, private sector to public sector, bridge the gap and put some best ideas forward. So Giuseppe, best idea that you think, you know, that would help your business and help the competitiveness of your bank and your country and your region thrive, what would you tell governments to do?
Reforms is already something very important to do. Then they have to show a real and serious pattern of reducing public debt. I think if you see the gap between Italian govies, the spread between Italian govies and Greek govies, Italian govies is higher than Greek, and for sure not because the economy in Italy is worse, but because they showed a better pattern of reduction in their public debt, which in Italy, for many reasons, it still didn't happen. On the other side, we have the chance to have a private debt, which is very low, so that the aggregate debt is like the other country, like France, Netherlands, Belgium, and so on. So we have opportunity, but we have to show very seriously that we want to work on reforms and reduction of debt, not spend money like we did in the last years. I don't know if you are aware about 100% bonus, 110% bonus on rebuilding some part of the houses, which was a sort of waste of money, even though, of course, fostering the real estate industry. We need to concentrate, like if you want, the recovery funds does, to concentrate on the main driver for the growth. And I think that if we help also as a private sector, like the banking system, not only to help our companies and our clients to pursue and to participate to recovery funds, but also to put other private money in order to develop even quickly the target that we have, I think Italy has a lot of chance ahead.
What about you, Stefano? Best idea.
I agree on the debt side. Even if, I will be much more proactive on the GDP side, because it's true that to contain debt is fundamental, but it takes years. And you have to work much more, to promote GDP growth. And it means reform, but if I'm going to play a card, it's fundamental reform of financial market to make them more open and to be, let me say, much smarter in attracting capital from outside. Because if you have capital from outside, really you have the fuel to unlock ideas, and it's going to generate snowball effect, challenging also the institution, to promote reform. So this is my guess and my suggestion.
I merge the two, reforms and push of GDP.
Push of GDP. But you can help attract that foreign capital, right?
We do.
As an international bank.
We do, because we 80% of what we do is exactly attract the capital money. And the example that I gave you is exactly what we do every day, every year in Italy, because there are really a lot of opportunities, and there are, as I told you, billions of euros that have been coming to the country on all the projects that I told you, and because the country needs these long-needed investments that will happen, in the next 3 to 5 years. So
you all want to see more push for GDP growth, but cutting spending and debt. Has any government figured out how to do this? Around the world?
No,
I guess companies do, and that's the point.
No, yeah, but it's true that if I see from historical perspective, only there are few cases in which a government was able to reduce systematically the public debt. This is the story of human beings. If I give a look to Europe, only Germany has been able to, also after pandemic, was able to react and to reduce public debt. So to reduce public debt, it's a long story. But obviously, we have a ratio which is public debt divided by GDP. Okay, I'm going to vote for GDP. Okay, it is faster, it is much more effective. Let me say it's much more exciting, because at the end of the day, we live in a very gloomy, era. We need excitement, especially for younger generation, to create new companies, to have new. It's fundamental. So the storytelling has to be a storytelling of GDP growth. That, let me say, the only card we have to play. Otherwise, we will be here to discuss about, everything, but you have to push GDP. So it's fundamental. And also US investors have an incredible opportunity, and this will be, in my opinion, the key points for the next year. Would you like, and this is a question not only to US, for any kind of investor, would you like to put your money to have upside? Because every investor wants to have upside, that's very clear. But would you like to put money where? In a safe environment, where rules works, where democracy exists, where we have values, or would you like to gamble? Okay, that's the question mark for every kind of investor. And this is the key question for the next month, years.
We'll leave it there. We're out of time. Thank you,
Let's see.
gentlemen.
Thank you.
So we are now